Welcome in, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Once again, my name is Millie Donovan. I am the Youth and Adult Services Assistant here at the library. Just want to welcome everyone into the library once again for what I hope will be an amazing program. I know will be an amazing program. I've had a couple of conversations with Amanda. I really enjoyed our back and forth. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Amanda Martin. She is sharing her experiences as a Peace Corps Director of Training and Programming in Madagascar. She will be sharing its people, its biodiversity, its culture, and at the end of the presentation, she will welcome some questions and answers. So if you can stick around, that would be amazing. Amanda is the Director of Programming and Training at Peace Corps, as I mentioned, in Madagascar. She has been there since 2022. With 3 decades of international development experience, she holds a master's degrees in social work and public health, along with a certificate in peace and conflict resolution. A Rotary Peace Fellow, Amanda's career spans leadership roles in nonprofits, including human rights and public health organizations in Guatemala, Colombia, and Bolivia. She has also served as a Peace Corps volunteer and worked on empowerment projects with women and adolescent girls. Outside of work, she enjoys traveling, hiking, cycling, writing, and spending time in nature. And if you can all just help me in welcoming Amanda to the stage here at Stonington, that would be gracious of you. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Comfortable?
Right. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know the days are shorter now, and today was an interesting day, so I just appreciate everyone making the effort to be here. And I see some familiar faces from Cove side. Thanks for coming. And then I see some faces that are new. So I don't actually live here in Stonington, but my mother lived here for many years with her husband, Bob, who's joined us tonight. And so I come to visit Bob every year when I make my annual pilgrimage to the U.S., and he's very kind to receive me. I reached out to Millie to ask if I could do a presentation on Madagascar, thinking that perhaps some people in the community might be interested. So here we are, and I really appreciate the library and Millie's efforts to put this together on short notice. I'm going to start out by reading you one of my letters. I have a practice where I write a letter to Bob every Sunday when I'm able to, and I try and describe what's going on in Madagascar and paint the picture of what life looks like there. So I'm going to share with you some of the details from a letter that I wrote to him back in March of 2023. Last week's trip to Majanga was definitely one of the highlights of my 4 months here in Madagascar. Majanga is the 4th largest city in the country with 280,000 people, a 14-hour drive north of where I live and work in Antananarivo, the capital. I was accompanied by 4 members of my Peace Corps team. The coastal culture is similar to many places in coastal Latin America, where I spent 18 years living and working. The heat and humidity create an early morning schedule where people are hustling and bustling at 5 a.m. just before sunrise at 5:30. This allows them to get a solid 5 hours of work in before the sun is blisteringly hot at midday. By lunchtime, the workers are generally famished and they eat a huge mountainous plate of white rice, if it is available, and if they have the money, and if the harvest was plentiful. This comes with a side dish of cooked green vegetables and another side dish of sauce with meat scraps. After lunch, people often lie down wherever they are, on a bed, a table, under a tree, on an empty rice sack, to rest for an hour in the intense heat and humidity as their food digests. No one moves from noon to 3 p.m. in the 95-degree heat. In the afternoon, people start working again, in the fields, in the streets, hauling goods from one side of the city to the other, going to school, buying goods in the market, or a million other things. Traffic in Majanga is terrible, as it is in Tana, the capital, where I live. Why is it so bad? construction. The roads in Madagascar are constantly being repaired. This is due to intense weather conditions, poor quality materials, and superficial repair processes, as well as a lack of government prioritization of road maintenance. In most places, the local people fix the road. Men, women, and children work with shovels, hose, rocks, and sand to dig and fill the massive potholes that are often larger than the cars. Then the workers, often starving, poor, in rags with children hanging onto them, stand on the side of the road with their hats in their hand, begging drivers and passengers to donate in recognition of their time and labor. Another contributor to the many traffic jams is the presence everywhere of ox carts. Rickety wooden carts drawn by teams of oxen plod along the main roads, hauling hundreds of pounds of rice, cement blocks, bricks, cassava, and many other items. The oxen are tough, strong, determined, and driven by the sharp whip of the driver, usually a Malagasy male aged 10 through 85. They do not falter or stop, but they walk slowly, which keeps the traffic bottled up. Many of the wooden carts are drawn not by oxen, but by barefoot Malagasy men. They run through the streets, pulling the carts behind them. Some carts are laden with sacks of rice, cement, blocks, and bricks, just like the ox carts. The men are young, strong, and streaming with sweat as they pull the carts uphill. As they head downhill, their feet almost fly to catch up with the momentum of the weight of the goods and the wooden wheels pushing them forward. I am astounded at their strength and determination. Yesterday, I saw an old, rusty automobile sitting atop a wooden cart, pulled by a young man along the main road. I have never in my life seen such a sight, not in India, Guatemala, Cambodia, Bolivia, or Haiti. Poverty necessitates invention. The public transportation options here are abundant. The big taxi is a minivan with the back doors hanging open. Passengers hop into the back door as the van moves slowly along. The fee is 5 cents, and the passengers hop out the back door while the vehicle is still in motion, wherever they need to get out. Another option is the poos-poos, a rickshaw drawn by a strong young barefoot Malagasy man who earns 20 cents per ride. He often runs children to school or back home from school, carrying 4 to 6 kids at a time in his chariot. Tuk-tuks, or motorized rickshaws, are popular in the larger cities. They are owned by local wealthy business people who may own up to 200 vehicles. The drivers rent the vehicle for $10 a day. The tuk-tuks are imported from India and are all painted bright yellow like a school bus. The Peace Corps vehicles have green license plates denoting an official government vehicle. At the police checkpoints, we are waved through, never stopped, due to the green plates. I will have a green plate when I finally get my car. Its delivery has been painfully slow, but I recognize that I am in the 4th poorest country in the world, where red tape and paperwork are everywhere. So if this car does arrive anytime soon, that will be a blessing and somewhat miraculous. So that's just a picture of what life in urban Madagascar looks like. How many of you have traveled to a developing country before? Okay, pretty much everybody. Has anybody been to Africa? Okay, has anybody been to Madagascar? 1. Okay, super, wonderful. So you have an idea when I'm talking about the noise and just the kind of overwhelming chaos, but there's a system to it, right? People know what they're doing and how they do it, even though it might mean for you, if you're driving, that it's really the adventure of a lifetime. So let's get started. Madagascar, a journey to the Red Island. So how many of you know about why Madagascar is the Red Island? Any ideas?
Frogs.
The frogs. Next. Anybody else?
This one. Spices.
Okay, there are red frogs. They're the spices.
That's not the reason.
That's not the reason. It's the soil. So if you look at Madagascar from above, it is red. The soil is red. The clay soil is very, very red. And there are several rivers that course through this enormous island. And as they bring the clay along the river to the ocean, it looks like a river of blood. So it's known as the Red Island. Okay, so my goal today is to share Madagascar, the place, the history, the people, the culture and the challenges, and Peace Corps, what it is and what we do. This little guy right here, he is Sifaka. No, he's a black and white ruffed lemur. And like I said, there are 103 different kinds of lemurs. And as you spend time in Madagascar and get to know the lemurs, you become familiar with the different types. And each one is more adorable and interesting than the next. Some of them dance, some of them sing, like the one that I played for you. Some of them are tiny, tiny. It's a mouse lemur, he's the tiniest one. And then some of them have just recently been rediscovered and were thought to be extinct. So Madagascar is one of the hotspots for primatologists. Duke has a lemur research center, and they send primatologists over to Madagascar to spend months in the national parks looking for different sorts of lemurs. Okay. So here we have a map of Africa, and off the southeast coast, that red island, is Madagascar. It is quite a large country, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm wondering if we can get the image, the whole image onto the screen, because it's cut off. Maybe pulling the projector back a little bit. Or, there you go, okay. Thank you. All right, my tech guy. Okay. Okay, great. So Madagascar broke off from India 80 million years ago. So it was actually like, this was Gondwana land, the whole thing with India and Madagascar. And then I think it was like 180 million years ago, that chunk broke off. And then 80 million years ago, Madagascar broke off of what is now India. And so I find it settling to think in terms of millions of years. It makes my daily life seem much less significant. So the unique flora and fauna developed without human intervention until 2,000 years ago. So this is one of the last places on Earth to be inhabited by humans, which is significant because you know what happens when humans come to a place, right? We kill the animals and eat them, and we cut down the trees and burn them. So the Madagascar had a much longer period of time for the animals to thrive. And they had very big animals. They had 9-foot-long lemurs. They had ostrich-type birds that laid eggs that were like this big. They had pygmy hippopotamuses. They had all kinds of animals until the first humans arrived. So the first humans arrived from Indonesia. And if you catch the current just right in the Indian Ocean, you can travel from Indonesia to Madagascar in 27 days. And so that's what they did. Those were the first people who, according to many people have researched this, and the theory that they've agreed upon is the first people were Indonesian. Then you had people coming from East Africa, the Bantu people, who came over to the west coast of Madagascar, and then you had Arab traders from the Middle East who came down to the northern coast and brought the Arabic language and also Islam to Madagascar. That said, currently about 95% of the population is Christian and 100% are animist. So Madagascar, as a result, is a mixture of many different cultures. Okay. And here's the island. It's a very big island. It's the 4th largest island in the world. And from top to bottom, it's like from Vermont to Miami. It's 1,100 miles, so not quite that long. And from east to west is 350 miles. And then if you decided to swim across the Mozambique Channel to Mozambique, that would be a 250-mile swim over here. And this shows some of the larger cities. The capital is Antananarivo, and that's right here. And the short term for Antananarivo is Tana. So that's where I live, Tana. The biggest port in the island is Tuamasina, which is also known as Tamatave because it has a French name and it also has a Malagasy name. The town that I read about in my letter is Majanga. That's up here. That is the town that has the largest Muslim influence and Arab influence. And there's many other fascinating, amazing places all over this island. And just to give you an idea of how bad the roads are, the drive from here to here is maybe 120 miles, and it takes 10 hours. Yeah, like on a good day, it takes 10 hours. And that's because of all the potholes and the trucks that get flipped over, and you're going from sea level to about 5,000 feet. So that's just to give you a little idea. And there are 18 different ethnic groups, and each of these groups has a distinct dialect. So a dialect is different than a language. So if somebody from the north, from Diego, and somebody from the south in Fort Dauphin were to have a conversation, they would have to listen very, 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 very carefully. It'd be like somebody from the Orkney Islands speaking to someone from rural Alabama. It's really quite distinct. So each group has their own distinct dialect, customs, clothing, food, and taboos. The taboos are very important in Madagascar, and that's something I had to learn. And they take them very seriously. So there's certain things that you cannot do. For example, the people from the very north of the island will not eat a certain type of bean that's known as the peanut bean. It kind of looks like a chickpea. And no one can explain to me why that is, but they won't eat this kind of bean. In other places in the island, they believe very strongly in witchcraft. Like, it's not like something from Salem. It's today, it's real. And you have to be very careful about not provoking people because then the witches might come to get you. However, if you want to avoid the witches, you take a handful of these peanut beans out of your pocket and you throw them on the floor, and the witches will not cross the peanut beans. But my question was, what if you're from the north and the peanut beans are taboo? Then what do you use to avoid the witches? And no one could answer that yet. So there's all kinds of interesting things. The unique biodiversity, I've mentioned the lemurs. They also have many different kinds of chameleons. How many people have seen a chameleon up close? Yeah, okay, quite a few of you. And what's the most remarkable thing about a chameleon? They change color, but there's something else that's equally as fascinating. Yeah, their eyes can go all the way back and up and down and around. And one more thing. Have you ever seen a chameleon eat? The tongue, yeah. So the tongue is as long as the body with the tail. And if there's like a cricket, they'll shoot the tongue out, grab the cricket, and bring it back in within a millisecond. It's really amazing. So next time you see a chameleon, catch a cricket and feed it to them. Okay, the baobab trees. There are 6 different kinds of baobab trees in the world, and 5 of them exist in Madagascar. And the baobabs grow 1 centimeter, so like, maybe like 40% of an inch in 1 year. So these baobabs can be 30 feet tall. And my favorite baobab tree takes 30 people around the base of it to hug it, to actually, meet your hands around. So these baobab trees, some of them are 1,000 years old, 1,200 years old. And if you like trees, these are truly amazing. They also have a fruit that when you crack it open, there's a powder inside, and it's a medicinal powder that local healers use because there's not a lot of access to healthcare. Other unique biodiversity aspects are the whale sharks. Has anybody seen a whale shark? So the whale shark is not a whale, it's a shark. It's actually a huge fish, and they can grow up to like 30 feet long. It's the largest fish in the ocean, and they have little spots on them. I've been really fortunate to swim with these whale sharks. And they don't eat people, so it's not a problem. But their mouth is like 5.5 feet wide, so when you're swimming with them, it can be a little disconcerting. Yeah. There are like 33 places in the world that have whale sharks, and this is one of them. So it's quite special. They also have humpback whales that migrate up from Antarctica, and they come up this way, and they hang out right in here. This is their breeding area. And so in the months of July and August, you can go on a whale boat and you can see the mamas and the babies. And they're flipping and, slapping their tails and slapping their fins, and truly amazing. Okay. 90% of the species in Madagascar are endemic. So that means 90% of the stuff you see there, animals and, birds and plants, you don't see anywhere else unless it's in a zoo or it's been exported. So it's really, really special. A lot of the plants are medicinal. That's what I'm really interested in, learning about how people use the local plants for healing. The population of this huge island is only 30 million people. Most of them live in urban areas like they do in America. It is, as I mentioned, it's a very poor country. 77% of the people live on less than $2 a day. $2 a day, 77%. The minimum wage, the monthly minimum wage in Madagascar is $50 US. They have the 6th lowest GDP in the world, and as I said, the monthly minimum wage is $50. So a little bit about the history. Does anyone recognize this woman? Okay, this is one of the queens, Queen Ranavaluna. So I'll start at the beginning. The Malagasy ruled their island for 1,400 years, from 500 to 1896. And they had kings and queens in different regions. And because it was so hard to get from one place to the next because of the mountains and the drought and the desert and such, they didn't really have one central governing place. So each region had their king and queen and often had one king and many queens. It was a pirate stronghold from 1600 to 1750 and a slave trading center. There were slaves that were taken from Madagascar, and there were slaves that were brought from Africa and then sold to other islands, which are currently Mauritius and the Comoros and Seychelles. The British missionaries arrived in the 1800s to spread Christianity. And this queen said, "We are not British and we are not Christian. We are animist." Animism, as I'm sure many of you know, is a belief in nature and natural objects. So for example, in Madagascar, I joined a hiking group. We hike every Sunday and we go out into the countryside outside of the city, and we'll see these enormous boulders, like amazing, beautiful boulders. And to the Malagasy, those boulders are sacred. So you will go there on a Sunday, you will bring your picnic, and then you will light your candles and your incense, and you might sacrifice a rooster and burn some special leaves, right? So to them, the nature is sacred. And I think, that's a good practice. Nature is sacred, and we need it to survive. So for them, a river might be sacred, not all rivers, but a certain river. A beach might be sacred, and they'll have a sign up that says, "Do not wear gold jewelry on this beach, do not wear red. If you are a woman, do not come on this beach if it is your time of the month." do not wear shoes on this beach. So they have very specific rules about their sacred places and what you can and can't do there. I find it fascinating. So then that queen died and another queen came on, and she liked the British missionaries, so she welcomed them, and then they really spread Christianity around the island. In 1896, the French arrived, and they occupied Madagascar. They colonized it until 1960, and it was brutal. A lot of people were killed. A lot of Malagasy people were killed. They did not want the French there. They rebelled, but they did not have the guns that the French did, and the French had hired the Senegalese military to attack the Malagasy. So yeah, it didn't end well, but in 1960 they finally got independence. The current government is an elected president with a 5-year term, a prime minister, a senate, and a national assembly. They just had their last election last year. Okay, I'm just going to paint a picture of the healthcare system and the educational system, so you can get an idea of what it looks like there for the people who live there. Malaria. So how many of you have been to countries that have malaria? Okay, did you take the prophylactic Malarone? Did it make you quite ill? No? Okay, yeah, it's, Malarone is the prophylactic, but it's also the cure if you get malaria, but it's very hard to get that pill in Madagascar because people don't have the money and they can't get it from industrialized nations. So with Peace Corps, we're working a lot on malaria prevention. Malnutrition in children under 5 is 47%. So that's about 2 million kids who suffer from stunting, particularly in rural areas because they're just not getting the nutrition they need. They might be eating white rice, but to get your daily requirement of protein by eating white rice, how many cups do you think you need to eat? Anybody? 11 and a half. Yeah, 11 and a half cups of rice will get you your daily requirement of protein. So that's a lot of rice. And yeah, maternal deaths are quite high. 10 women die daily from childbirth. So, it's not that they don't have accomplished and experienced midwives, it's that they don't have the health clinics or the resources that are necessary when there's an emergency, right? Polio has recently come back. Over the past 5 years, there have been 300 cases. And with the Bill Gates Foundation and with Rotary International, they did a fabulous job in almost eradicating polio worldwide, with the exception of 3 countries, which I think was Nigeria, Burma, and one other one. Pakistan, that's it. However, in the past 5 years, cases have developed in Madagascar as well, and I think 2 other African nations. So Peace Corps volunteers in Madagascar are also working on eradication of polio by delivering vaccinations to children. And it's an easy vaccine to give. You don't need a needle. The children won't run crying and screaming because it's just a drop in the mouth. And they try to make it cherry flavored, but it doesn't really taste like cherries. Okay, so a lot of the kids have not been vaccinated because of lack of access. It's hard to get out there to reach them. And water, sanitation, and hygiene, which is WASH, only 17% of the population have the basic sanitation access to latrines and running water. Again, 17% have access to running water and latrines, not flush toilets, but latrines. Okay, for education, 60% of the kids go K through 5, actually 1st grade through 5th grade, but then it drops to 35% enrollment for middle school and high school. And over 50% of the workforce has no formal education. 7% of the kids aged 7 to 19 have basic skills in mathematics and 23% in reading. So, you know, why is this? Why are the kids not going to school? Well, there might not be a school, there might not be a teacher, They might be an hour and a half walk away from the school. There might be 3 rivers between their house and the school, and when it's the rainy season, the rivers swell and they can't get across, or if they do try to go across, they get swept downstream and lost. So there's a lot of reasons. There's also a registration fee, and that tiny fee, which might be $4, is a huge amount of money to the family who maybe has 8 or 9 kids, right? Yeah. And kids are also kept home to work in the rice fields. Okay. Other challenges in Madagascar, sex tourism for foreign tourists and Malagasy men, mostly European men. Gender inequality is a huge problem. There's massive corruption at all levels, which really makes it difficult. There's a lot of mining and gemstones in Madagascar. Huge amounts of money are made. But with the extraction of these resources, companies by law must pay royalties to the government. The royalty is a tax on non-renewable resources. But most of the royalties are siphoned off by the politicians and don't go to the local people as they should to be invested in healthcare and education. Climate change. Madagascar is #1 in Africa for the impact of climate change because of its location, because it's an island, and because it's 90% deforested. Their cyclone season is about to begin. It's November through March, and it's predicted that we'll have 5 cyclones this year. Cyclones are what we call hurricanes and what India calls typhoons. They do a lot of damage. Those cyclones can destroy the agricultural crops, which means food, and people's income is destroyed until they can grow another round of crops. Foreign mining companies pollute and exploit the workers. There are terrible roads, and the healthcare facilities are underfunded and understaffed. So, on a positive note, there's Peace Corps. I work with Peace Corps. I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in 1993. I graduated from college from Penn State, and I think it was a month later, I got on the plane and went to Guatemala, and I was sent to a rural Maya Quiche village where I served my 2 years, and I loved it so much that I stayed for a 3rd year. I was an integrated agricultural program volunteer, so I worked with small animals and fishery projects. I also worked with nutrition and women's health. So that really got me going on my career for international development since 1993, and Bob came to visit me, and that was fun, with my mom and my grandma. They came to my little Mayan village. So Peace Corps is, how many people have not heard of Peace Corps? Call you out here. Okay, good. It's nice. I think a lot of young people today don't know about Peace Corps because there's so many competing things on TikTok and Instagram and such. But I find that people who are over the age of 50 often are familiar with Peace Corps. So it was started in 1963 by JFK, or 1961. And the mission is to promote world peace and friendship. Isn't that nice? I think that's so beautiful. And almost 250,000 people have served in Peace Corps, 250,000 Americans, in 140 countries. 140 countries around the world have had Peace Corps projects. Today, we have Peace Corps in 60 countries. It's 2 years of service in a developing country in one of the 6 program areas which are listed here: agriculture, education, health, youth development, environment, community, economic development. And Peace Corps has been, in Madagascar for 31 years, and we've had 1,600 volunteers serve. And this is one of our most recent groups of volunteers. These are the health volunteers. They're a really fun group. So, any questions? Yeah, Alan.
I asked you before, looking at you, you remind me so much of my son who went to Africa, to Senegal for 3.5 years in the Peace Corps, just about when you went. And my question was, I've always had this dream, what would have happened had he stayed overseas? He married somebody who wasn't interested in doing that, But for you, for example, how challenging was it during all the political upheaval in the United States that to have a sustained 30 years career in various countries? Was it terribly difficult? Was it reasonably available for somebody with the resilience and character that you have, or what was it like?
Yeah, so, yeah. Sure. Okay, so if I heard correctly, your son served in the Peace Corps in Senegal around the mid-90s.
Right.
And, but he met someone who was his partner, and that person was not interested in living overseas. And if he had pursued such a career, could he have done it for the following 30 years like I did?
Right, exactly.
Okay. There's a lot of factors that come into play. My trajectory, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and then from there, I moved to China to be an English teacher for a private school. And from there, I backpacked around the world for a year and a half with my tent and my boyfriend. Then I moved to Bolivia, and I worked in a women's prison on income generating projects. And from there, I went to grad school in South Carolina, and then I moved to Colombia, where I worked with a human rights organization. So I've been all over the place, and every 3 years I change organizations, I change nonprofits, and then I became director of several nonprofits over the years. So I didn't stay with one agency for 30 years. I like to change things up, make life interesting. So we're all different. One benefit of Peace Corps is if you finish the 2-year term, then you get what's called non-competitive eligibility. Is anybody familiar with that? That's a government term. So it means that from the day you finish your Peace Corps service, you have 365 days to apply for a U.S. government job, and you will not be considered as like the entry-level person off the street who applies for the job. You'll be bumped up a notch. So you have a better chance of getting the interview. You're not guaranteed a job, but you have a better chance. So some of the young people in my group in Guatemala did that, and then they've had 30-year careers in the U.S. government with all the benefits. Good for them. Their life hasn't been as interesting as mine. So, it's a toss-up. You pick what you want, the stability or the experiences or a mixture of both. So I'm sure your son has chosen the right path for him. Yeah. Alan. You had a question.
One of them is, those large sacred boulders, where did they come from?
Okay.
I mean, around here we have all these glacial erratics. Spectacular.
Yeah.
And we know how they got here.
So Alan's question is, where did these enormous boulders come from? Because the boulders here are glacial deposits. And what's the situation in Madagascar? The answer is, I don't know. But you should come and visit me and research it.
That's why they're sacred.
That's why they're sacred. Yes.
The other question is the forests. I think of baobab trees, where they sort of isolate. They're very small. But there's an enormous deforestation. Are there other forests made of other trees besides baobab trees?
Okay. So the question is, baobab trees, when we see them, tend to be isolated and not part of a forest. And in Madagascar, because of the deforestation, we have the baobab trees individually. But are there forests of other trees? Is that the question? Okay. There are very few primary forests left in Madagascar because what people rely on to cook their food is charcoal. And charcoal is made from wood that is burned. And then every day you can see people with a rice sack of charcoal carrying it on their back or on their head home to be able to cook. And it's devastating because you know that they're cutting down trees to cook. And you're like, don't do that, don't cut down the trees. Well, how are they going to cook their rice? So again, with Peace Corps, we've come up with different models of stoves. that use less charcoal. But to get back to the question, there are forests in Madagascar. They tend to be in remote areas on the west coast, where you do see baobabs as part of a forest environment. So they're surrounded by other trees. And that's where you're going to get very distinct types of lemurs who like to eat that baobab fruit. Yeah. Sure.
Are there any lemurs with
Okay. You mean one that'll grab? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let me think. Are there any lemurs with the prehensile tails? I don't know the answer. I'm trying to imagine like all the lemurs I've seen. I'm so focused on their antics that I'm not quite checking out the tails. I want to say yes.
No, I think New World monkeys are the only primates with prehensile tails.
There you go. There's your guy. New World monkeys are the only ones with the prehensile tails. I've been shown up. MJ.
Amanda, would you describe what you do in 2 or 3 days a week? What's your day like?
Oh gosh. I wish I could. Yeah, my day is so unpredictable. I mean, there's just never a dull moment. Because I oversee programming and training for the 42 volunteers that we have in country, but also for the 52 staff we have. And so I'm working with our program managers. So we have 52 Malagasy staff. Some of them have been on staff for 2 years. Some of them have been on staff for 25 years. They are the most amazing team of hardworking, compassionate, driven, fun people. Like they're professional and accomplished and wonderful. And then we have 3 Americans who are directors. I'm the director of programming and training. We have a country director. We have a director of finance. So we work together as a team. And my day consists of working with my staff to create training programs for our volunteers to ensure that the work they're doing in their villages matches the needs of the villagers. So the volunteer might go into the village and say, oh, these people really need toilets. We need to build them some latrines. And so that volunteer requests funding from USAID to be able to build latrines. And so they build all these latrines. No one uses them. Why? Because in that ethnic group, it is body or taboo to deposit your waste inside of a building. Everyone deposits their waste in an open field, practicing open defecation. So you have to make sure that what your project is what the people want. So a lot of what I'm doing is working with my Malagasy staff to design training programs for volunteers and the local Malagasy counterparts to make sure that the project is reaching goals that increase quality of life, access to food, access to education and healthcare, improve the quality of life in the terms of the local people, not in American terms.
Question.
Yes.
One thing we haven't discussed is Madagascar has very few natural resources like oil, gas. And then second part of my thought is, what about travel to Madagascar? National Geographic. You know, it doesn't sound like they have any real natural resources to support themselves or export.
That is incorrect. Madagascar has many natural resources. They have enormous amounts of mines. They have nickel and cobalt. They have gold. They have 25 different kinds of gemstones. They're number 2 in sapphires in the world after Sri Lanka. They also have, somebody mentioned spices. They're the number 1 exporter of vanilla. 70% of the world's vanilla comes from Madagascar. And about 6 years ago, it was fetching $600 for a kilo, so 2.2 pounds. So it's a very, very wealthy country, but because of corruption and roads, things are mismanaged. And the little people, the farmers who are growing all this stuff are not getting the money, but the middlemen and the business people are. National Geographic has quite a presence in Madagascar. I see their trucks all the time here in my neighborhood. There are many different NGOs that are in Madagascar working on health, education, agriculture, ecology, biodiversity, food sustainability. There's thousands of NGOs, which are Malagasy and also international, and many American organizations, including USAID. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think, so how many people are keen on natural remedies? Okay, right? For a lot of reasons, right? And so we think food is medicine, and 60% of the pharmaceuticals that when you walk into a pharmacy here in the US, those come from plants, right? So, for example, where does aspirin come from? The willow tree. So if you pick off one of the tender branches from a willow tree, a little twig, and you chew on it, that's like taking an aspirin. It's not quite as concentrated. So medicine is all around us. And in Madagascar, because people for so long, well, still don't have access to professional doctors or health clinics or a pharmacy, because they would have to walk for 10 hours and they don't have the money or the time to do it, to get the medicine, they use the home remedies that are taught by their mothers and their grandmothers and great-grandmothers. A lot of the things that they use in Madagascar are similar plants that I was learning about when I lived in Bolivia. I started a medicinal plant program for women when I was living in rural Bolivia before I went to Madagascar. So I'm trying to think of some of the things. A lot of home remedies are to cure diarrhea, because a lot of children suffer from diarrhea, and that can actually kill them if they get severely dehydrated. So for example, the leaf of the avocado tree, the leaf of the guava tree, those are both excellent for curing diarrhea, better than Pepto-Bismol, and it's cheaper. Yeah. Yeah.
I might have missed this, but is there a federal government now, or are there still divided sections? And why isn't the government
Yeah.
make life better for them?
So is there a federal government, and are there still kings and queens, and why isn't the government doing more if there is one? So there is an elected president. He's actually been the president now for 3 terms. It's a 5-year term. And he's illegally president, because you're not allowed to be president if you hold dual nationality, and he has a French passport. But he slipped through the cracks, and he's very corrupt. And so the question is, why don't the people rise up and have a revolution and take him out?
Well, no, that isn't my question.
Well, that's my question. And because, I was in Latin America for 18 years, and if somebody doesn't do their job, they're out, and you put a new one in. So I'm like, why aren't Malagasy people doing something about this? And it's the culture. It's a culture where people are used to putting up with things, and they have so little, and they just want to put food on the table for their kids, if they even have a table. So they're not interested in going macro level, because they just have to deal with day-to-day survival. So there is a government, there's a prime minister, there's a senate, and there are locally elected officials, the mayors, but they also have kings and queens, mostly kings, in the tribal areas. So you've got to, like as Peace Corps, we have to work with all of those levels, and that's where we really rely on our local staff, because they know how to approach the king. What you say, what you wear, which chair you sit in. I mean, there's a whole order to it. So when I have to go with them, I have them walk me through it beforehand, so I don't make any mistakes. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
On a Rhodes Scholar trip, grandparent, grandchild, and I loved it. It was an incredible so long, I was amazed at the quality of the places we stayed in. We had, I mean, I felt very safe. I didn't, the big traffic issues and so on, but I would just encourage anybody that's interested, in spite of the fact of the poverty and so on, I thought it was a marvelous experience for my 14-year-old granddaughter. So, encourage you to Rhodes Scholar or another group that knows what they're doing. I don't think it's probably easy to go on your own.
And there was a question about how to get there, right? And I second your comments about Madagascar being an amazing place to visit. There are just so many wonderful and unique things to see. And I would say that, you know, the safety and the beauty of the tourist areas isn't due to the French, but to the Malagasy people. They have such a beautiful culture. They're very welcoming people, very warm. My nephew, who lives in Woodbridge, he came to visit me for a month in June and July, and I sent him off for 2 weeks on his own for a road trip with a driver and my car, and everywhere he went, people just embraced him and, you know, took him hiking and showed him wonderful things. So it is a fabulous country. It's quite far to get there from here. For example, I arrived 2 weeks ago, and it's an 11-hour flight from Tana to Paris, and then a layover, and then a 9-hour flight to JFK. You can go through with Air France through Paris, you can go with Turkish through Istanbul, you can go with Ethiopian through Addis, or you can fly to South Africa. Those are your 4 options.
What time of the year would you go there?
It depends what you want to see. If you want to see the humpback whales, July or August. If you want to swim with the whale sharks, October, November. If you want to just hang out with the lemurs, I think it's always best to go during the dry season because the rain can be very unpredictable. April through November. Yeah. And if you want more information, my contact is there, and I'm happy to help you with any details about, you know, how to get there, where to go, what to do. Mike.
You mentioned using all the trees for cooking, eating. Is there any system out there to do replanting?
Yeah.
Is Peace Corps doing anything like that? Or-
Yep, we do reforestation. The government has reforestation initiatives.
Can you keep it up?
Lots of NGOs have reforestation initiatives, tree planting, but we don't call it tree planting, we call it tree growing. Because the government will plant 1 million trees, but then no one takes care of them, they don't get watered, they wither and they die. So we do tree growing projects. Yeah, and we encourage the local people to see the benefits of that. We talk about, you know, what are the benefits of having a tree? Shade, prevents soil erosion, root systems, biodiversity, medicinal plants, fruits, everything, oxygen that trees provide us. Yeah. Yes.
Do they have solar stoves so they don't have to cut down trees?
There are a lot of solar panels. There are some solar cook stoves. They're not as prevalent as I think they could be. But there are projects to promote solar stoves. Yeah.
Propane or liquefied natural gas that is brought in, or what's the major energy source beyond charcoal?
Yeah. The majority of the country doesn't have access to electricity or other energy sources. If you have some money, then you can buy a cook stove and you can get a propane tank, and then when it runs out, you can go and, you know, swap it out. But you have to have some money for that.
What do you cook on?
I live in an expat compound, and I have a proper stove that is electric, and the electric goes off 14 hours a day, and I have a generator. But I'm pushing, I'm almost at the point of boycotting, to get solar panels so that I can have, instead of a diesel burning generator, I can have solar. Yeah. But I'm very rare. I'm in like the top 0.001% in Madagascar.
Live in an apartment or a detached house? Have you ever had a chef
Because I work with the U.S. government, and so I have to live in U.S. government housing, which is a house that's rented by Peace Corps. And so it's a big house with a big garden where I grow all my medicinal plants and my food. And then there's a wall around it with razor wire, and there's a guard at the gate, and it's in a compound. So to come into the compound, you have to have an ID. Now, the place I lived before was 99 acres of tropical forest jungle in Bolivia, and I built my own house. And it was a tiny house with a dry composting latrine, rainwater catchment system, and solar energy. So this was a big change for me. And so I have a Malagasy family that lives with me, and they help me to feel like I'm actually in Madagascar. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's been a big shift. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there's fantastic places to hike. Local people don't hike. They carry 100-pound sacks of rice on their heads up and down the mountains, but it's not a sport, it's survival. So there's a group of expats, mostly from the States, some from Europe, some from NGOs from Japan and China, and we get together on Sunday mornings. We call it church, and we hike for like 4 hours through the rice paddies and up and down the mountains to the old queen's palaces, to these sacred boulders, and yeah, just to get out of the city. The air quality there is pretty horrible. This past week, it was 9 times the acceptable maximum level declared by the WHO. Yeah. So, yeah.
God bless you and your work.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody.